Welcome to Software Testing Unleashed, the podcast for software testers, developers, and test automation engineers who want to create stunning, great quality software. I'm Richie, software quality coach, keynote speaker, and author. My guest today is Pekka Klärck. He is a developer and independent consultant from Finland, and he is the lead developer of Robot Framework. Yes, you hear right, the Robot Framework. So it was a big pleasure to talk to him and to ask him about how did all the Robot Framework stuff started years ago, what were the big challenges, and what's on the roadmap for the future. And I have a little gift for you. In the show notes, you will find a 10% discount code for the next RoboCon online conference and also the chance to win one free ticket. Just check out the show notes of this episode. And now, enjoy. Hi, Pekka. Great to have you on the show here.
Yeah, hi. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's very nice. We are here at the Quest Tag in Frankfurt 2025 now. And René Rona invited you to the podcast here, said, Richie, you have to do an episode with Pekka because he's one of the people who is with Robot Framework from the beginning on and developing it and is one of the brains of it. And I said, okay, we do it. And now you're here. It's great. So let's go directly into it. Maybe get us into the start of the Robot Framework. What was your experience and how does it work to start like a project which is so popular now?
It started in 2004, so already two decades ago. I was in Helsinki University of Technology, and I needed to do my master's thesis. I had already been working in industry doing software testing, test automation. Sometime I had implemented different kind of automation frameworks for different kind of projects. They were different, but there were a lot of common components, not common components because I always implemented everything from scratch. But I had noticed that I needed similar kind of things there. And then in my master's thesis, I studied that, okay, could it be possible to make it this bit easier that we could have some kind of a logger, for example, that could be reused regardless of context, or parser for the data or something like that. But when I was studying this, I read basically everything that was written about test automation at that point and so on. I implemented prototypes and I realized that actually we can have a core of a framework that is generic. So it's not only like components, you mix and match, but the core is generic and you can extend it with reusable libraries and things like that. That's how it was born, the ideas. Mm-hmm. My colleague that I had been working in an earlier project was then about the same time he joined Nokia Networks, working there. And he asked me that, okay, do I know ideas for how to do test automation in their project? They needed a solution, very heterogeneous environment. Nothing was available. It was, there was no like internal APIs and so on. Nothing commercial could have even been available. They needed to implement something themselves. And we had some success earlier. Asked me, and I said, actually, I've been studying this lately, and now I know much more, and these are the ideas that I have. They got interested, and then we started developing the framework based on the prototype ideas at Nokia Networks. Mm. They grew internally, spread into other kind of parts of the company, totally different domains there. I realized, okay, it makes sense. And this same colleague of mine, Petri Haapio, who had got me there, was able to fought with lawyers. So we got the permission to open source in 2008. So since that, it's been open source. Nokia Networks was still sponsoring the development until 2015. So I was still working for there as an external consultant, helping teams to use the framework. And at the same time, when I noticed that this cannot be done with the framework, me and other people in the team. We had a small team there. We were adding new features and making it that way better. But nowadays, we have Robot Framework Foundation that is sponsoring the development. Nokia is one of the members there, but there's many other members as well. Many members nowadays from Germany. René, you mentioned, is the chairman of the board of our foundation. And so that's where we are now. But I'm still involved.
So it's more a neutral professional organization about it, and not a company who is forcing.
Technically, the foundation is a Finnish association, so it was founded in Finland. When it was we had Finnish consulting companies who were selling services related to robot framework, and it became apparent that Nokia sponsorship, direct sponsorship, is going to end at some point. So they formed this kind of a foundation so that there was some kind of maintenance for that, because it's kind of hard for you if you have a consulting company and selling services for open source product, and if the open source product isn't maintained, that's kind of a challenge then. Yeah. So that they were competitors, of course, but they had joint interest in keeping this thing alive. And that was done like now a bit over 10 years ago, and now it's been growing and growing. And now I think, I don't know actually, well, I don't know the numbers. We have now like something like 85 members in the foundation. I don't know actually numbers that what they are, so like how many we have in Finland, how we have it, and elsewhere. But nowadays we have a lot of members in Germany and Netherlands and so on. It's been spreading here in the Central Europe a lot.
Yeah, and it's very popular. I know it from my clients. They're all dealing with the idea of going there or are already at the robot framework. So can you describe us, because not everyone is aware of the robot framework. So what's the main idea and the concept behind it?
The idea is that the framework tries to make everything that is basically generic in all kind of automation projects, so it handles that. So there's parser for data, so it has its own syntax that it can run. It can parse and then it starts executing it. Then it has a standardized API for extensions. So we have a lot of ready-made extensions, but you can also very easily create your own. So it has those. And then it generates logs and report. And they are all like the same format. And that helps you so that if you need to do automation from scratch, basically like embedded project or something where you maybe need to implement everything yourself. So instead of starting from, okay, what would be my data format and how do I report this and how do I actually interact with my system, you just deal with this interaction with your system part, and then data format comes from robot, and then reporting comes from robot, and then it's very easy. You get everything else basically for free. And because it's generic, we have like awesome editors nowadays, some like for data and something like that. That if it was your like custom format, then you were using something like just a text editor for that. But now we have a very good plugins for VS Code and PyCharm and so on. So it makes it so much easier. So that's kind of the power of that. When things that are kind of generic are made available in a generic package, then we can have a lot of extensions for that. But you can still customize it very easily.
I think that's crucial for today's environments to make the configuration and individualization for your project and for your environment there.
Yeah, it of course depends totally on a project. So kind of the best fit for the framework is heterogeneous environment where you may have web interfaces, may have databases, may have REST APIs, and may have embedded systems, so something like custom interfaces or something like that. Because we have tool libraries available more for those. Of course, if you have custom stuff, then you need to deal with that yourself, but it's not very complicated. Whereas if it would be like we are testing just a web page, and everybody there is using TypeScript to write their web page and so on, then most likely using TypeScript with something like Playwright is better for you because everybody knows the tooling and so on, and the benefit of robot framework aren't that big. Even in that context, if you have stakeholders that want to understand test cases, like they want to be in kind of a very human readable format, then robot framework has that. So you can write test cases in just plain text, and they can be sentences basically on high level. And you still get log and report, but then the benefits are smaller. But in that kind of heterogeneous environments where you have a lot of interfaces and custom stuff and so on, then the benefits are really big.
Yeah. It's now more than 20 years that the framework grows and expanded, and you were there the whole time. So what are the biggest milestones in this area, or where you say there were features that are really one of the most used nowadays? So what comes to your mind there?
Well, if we look at the version 1, basically, that was the first one. That was only used internally. Version 2 was the first one that was then was the open source version. And I think still in version 2, the data was in HTML tables, and that was not very easy to edit. We very quickly from 2, we started to go into plain text format, which is easier to edit. It's easier to put into version control system. So that's been a big change. Then later, at some point when we moved our quite crappy parser that was initially dealing both with those HTML files and text files and so on, we fixed that, we implemented that again, and we had a much better parsing API that provides a very good parsing model. That was a big change because that then allowed made it much more easier to create those editors, because they can also use the same parsing model and they get all the information about all the tokens that are there and so on. That's been a huge deal. All kind of other APIs have been, but I think the biggest thing that has been changing all over the years is the ecosystem that we have. And that's the one I'm really proud of. That's something that I don't need to do anything there. It's just evolving. That's why I'm happy that the design decision with interfaces and so on that Robot Framework have made it possible that this kind of ecosystem has grown. And so I really love our community that is building all these tools, and the companies that are helping, and individuals and so on. So that's much bigger than the Robot Framework itself. If you would just take the core without anything else, well, it would be useful, especially if you were anyway needed to implement all the libraries yourself. But considering that you wouldn't have these editors, you wouldn't have all the ready-made libraries, integrations to all kind of test management systems and so on, it would be totally different game. So that's the kind of the key.
Yeah. That's also what I heard, that the community is so strong and they're building a lot of plugins and extensions and doing this and that, and that always makes the product more aware and more flexible for the different projects and so on.
Yeah. It can also happen so that when we have a new release, it can be like a quite big release. And there have been a lot of changes internally. For normal user, when you look at the release notes, you don't even get kind of the point that what was that. There was some listener API that was enhanced, and what was that even? Yeah. But then people are building solution for that on top of that, and then it takes like a few months or half a year, and then there are new tooling. Like for example, this listener interface changes nearly 2 years ago. We made big changes there, have enabled to make things like self-healing. Listeners that are fixing your locators on a fly and stuff like that, and which is of course pretty cool.
Yeah. When we talk about numbers in the community, do you have any numbers? How many installations roundabout or downloads maybe?
No, it's impossible to tell anything exact, because we get download numbers from Python package index. Mm-hmm. But they are totally inflated because continuous integration systems are often installing them again and again. So there are trends and they are growing. But the numbers are totally crazy. Like, well, it's not 1 million a day, but it's like 1 million a month at least. But I'm not sure. Well, I'm quite sure that it's not million human every month downloading or something. So it's kind of in a sense that it's rather useless statistics, because it's like. But there's still a lot. Those numbers are much higher now than they were a few years ago, for example. So if you compare them there, it's been growing. So that's what we know. Another problem with this trying to follow trends is that I've heard, I haven't actually checked myself, I've heard that the visitors in our web pages have been going down. But that's most likely then due to AI. Yeah. So people are asking from AI, and then there's no visits anymore. So and so on. So that's most likely the reason. So we aren't super worried about that. It was like somehow concerning what's happening. It's our popularity going down when visits are getting there. But we figure that's mostly the reason. Yeah. So it's the AI tooling has visited it already, and so when people are asking questions, they just okay, this is the stuff.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and for the ecosystem, how many plugins do you think exist there? If you have to,
there must be hundreds. At least over 100. But of course, many of them are not anymore. Like they can be old and not maintained anymore. Even in that case, if they're available and they would be relevant in your system, in your context, of course, even if they aren't maintained, you can still take a look at them and get some inspiration. Maybe you start maintaining that, or maybe you implement something new based on those ideas and so on. Yeah. But there are a lot. There's loads of libraries, loads of other kind of extensions, and but I haven't checked the number.
Yeah, René told me up front that you are also part of the roadmap team for Robot Framework and dealing with the future of it. What are, when you can tell it here? So what are the next big things that you want to implement there?
Well, we are just about to get new release out. It was a beta was released. The second beta was released last week. Hopefully, release candidate next week or very soon anyway. The major feature in that release is so-called secret variables. Mm-hmm. So you can create variables that when they are executed, when you're using them, passing them as arguments to keywords or getting them as return values, the actual secret value is not locked in any kind of log level. So regardless of how detailed logging you get from robot, it's not accidentally disclosed. Well, of course, you can accidentally disclose if you use it bad, if you use it insecurely. But in general, the value is there so that we don't log it, and then you can create keywords that require the arguments to be a secret. So they only accept those secret values, and that helps in regulated environments with banks and so on. That it helps dealing with that kind of a passwords or tokens. This has actually been there's Tatu Aalto, an active community member who works for Finnish Bank, OP. He has been helping with that because it happens to be very important in their context. So he has been able to get some kind of a company time to work on that, which is great.
Yeah.
So that's coming. That's it. The feature is implemented. We just yesterday actually, when I was driving here from Amsterdam with René, we were there in an auto conference. We were discussing about that feature in a car, and then we actually realized one small thing that should be changed. And I was chatting already with Tatu, and we're going to fix it. But anyway, that the feature is like it's done and ready to use in beta 2 if somebody's interested. Not sure when this podcast is going to be out. If you already have the release candidate or even the final release of Robot Framework 7.4, but yeah, it's there. The next after that, I'm most likely going to concentrate on our user guide, which is a very detailed manual, like about all the features, like a reference manual. It's awesome, but it's very old technology. Like we generated this huge HTML file. If you would print it, it would be 100 pages. So it doesn't look that good. Content is great, but we want to make it a bit more modern. And also at the same time, when we modernize it, we want to proofread it and make sure that the information there isn't outdated and so on. So that's what I'm going to concentrate next with some other people from the community. After that, what will happen? Will it be Robot Framework 7.5 or maybe 8.0 next? Isn't yet sure, but most likely we are going to have one more like feature release in this Robot Framework 7 series, where I think one of the key features is going to be Markdown support for our documentation, because we support different kind of documentation formats when writing like keyword library, keyword documentation and test documentation and so on, but we don't support Markdown at the moment, and it's been de facto standard.
Yeah.
And that's what AI tools use and so on. So I think we absolutely need to add support for that. Going forward, one thing that is bothering people in bigger projects is that the namespace is related to keywords that you import and variables that you import. When you import so-called resource files, they are badly designed. I can say that they are badly designed because I've designed them. So it's I need to,
You're allowed to.
Yeah, I'm totally allowed to say that that's bad design. There are reasons why it's been designed like this, but it just doesn't make sense in larger context. So we need to fix that, and that's going to be quite a big task because we need to first design how we want it to be. So how we want the design to be. Then we need to implement that, and also we need to make sure that the old bad ways still work. We probably want to emit deprecation warnings if you are using the bad ways, but we cannot do it so that we just break everybody's test. And now coming up with the new release saying that now these namespaces, they work well, now they work as they should be, and then people's test cases break, so they aren't going to be happy.
Yeah.
So we want to, of course, going forward, we want to make that the only way, but we need to take backwards compatibility into mind, which is something we need to do also otherwise, and try to avoid breaking people's tests. So that's going to be an extra challenge there.
Yeah. So great things are coming there. But you're doing a software product for testers. So they are very critical. Do you get many? Do you get many bug tickets or issues from the community? That
of course.
Doesn't work like expected here.
Of course, not that many though. I mean, considering how big Robot Framework codebase is and how much it does, there aren't that many bug reports. But of course there are things that don't always work as expected. But we are using Robot Framework to test Robot Framework. And,
that was my next question. Yeah, great.
We have close to 7,000 Robot Framework test cases for Robot Framework, and then we have some hundreds of unit test cases as well. We are using Robot Framework when testing Robot Framework in cases where actually unit testing tools would make more sense, but we want to kind of drive it to extreme and see how it works there. And in other normal projects, unit testing tools would pay better in some of those cases. But But yeah, we have the async test tooling around it, so it's quite easy to add those new tests. So yeah, we do get, but I'm very pedantic in my programming. What I love about working for this Robot Framework Foundation nowadays is that they also trust me and don't push me that, okay, now you should have the release out and you should rush it and get it. I'm allowed to work so that there's no technical debt piling in, and I can make those features work so that that's in longer term much better. We can keep it steady state.
Yeah.
If I would be rushing and putting half finished release features out, then I needed to next be fixing those and then trying to put some band-aids there, and then in the end the code base would be in horrible shape.
Yeah, it's a problem a lot of projects dealing with because the developers are under pressure. So it's good that you can develop your plan with good quality, which is
exactly.
important.
We needed then. I mean, if we wanted to be faster in that way, then we needed a bigger team to make it sustainable. But now I'm mostly working as alone. We have contributors, of course, contributing to the core. The major contributors are the ecosystem. So that's the easiest way to contribute in a sense, because you don't need to contact me and say that how should this behave. You just use robots APIs and you use, and that's how people are contributing most. But their contribution, of course, to the core as well. Mm-hmm. And we hope to grow the base of people who actually know the core well to help more, starting maybe in the future to review pull requests and so on. But that's a slow process as well. Mm. So me being the only active developer there isn't great. It would be good to have someone more often to discuss complicated design decisions, and also, of course, it was faster. And of course, there's this so-called buzz factor or whatever that. If something happens to me, what then happens? But the code is in relatively good shape. I'm not really worried that if something would happen to me, that project would die. But of course, still having more people involved with the actual code development would be good as well.
Yeah, sounds great. You're now speaking to the software testing community, to the international one. Do you have any wishes to them? So that what they can contribute to you, what they can do for a robot framework to make it more grow and useful?
Well, in general, I think, of course, if you're using robot framework and like it, spreading the word about it is good, that people know about it. I know personally very well that it's not always the right choice for every project. So I'm not trying to say that everybody should use it and so on. But what would be good that if people in general knew about it, so that when they are thinking about solution, that okay, this is the project, this is the context where I now need automation solution. If they knew about robot framework, its capabilities, they can say, okay, would that be a good choice or should I use something else? Mm-hmm. And it's totally fine if they say, well, something else is better. But in some cases, robot framework would be better. And if they don't know about it, there's kind of zero chance they're going to choose it, of course. So that would be good that if people in general just knew about it. Yeah. And it's nowadays in, for example, Germany, I think it's very well known. So most people in the industry know about it already. So that isn't a big problem. But then there are other countries where we are spreading slowly. Yeah. Which is, but kind of related that it's interesting that we have very active community, for example, in Thailand. Yeah. We have no contacts with them there, but we just know you can see now and then like a blog post or something like that in Thai. Okay. So, and then we have a very, very active community also in Brazil. Yeah. Okay. We have some contacts there, but so there are people. Someone has learned about that, and then the usage has grown. So there's interesting pockets like that around the world. But then it can also be that if you go, I think Denmark, for example, which is relatively close to us, I don't think most people know about robot framework there. Yeah, yeah. So.
Oh, okay. It's interesting. So the different countries are.
Yeah, I guess that because we have all the information is available and so on. If someone learns about it and gets interested, they can study it and they can spread the word there in their own language, and so it's interesting. Yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of the big wish for me, that if you know about it, then you can spread the word. And of course, I mean, if you're benefiting it a lot, and then we have this foundation that is sponsoring the development, paying some other people also about the development and so on, that would be, of course, very, very good if more companies join. We already have our over 80, but we know that there's over 80, much more companies using robot framework. Yeah. So that kind of, that would be good.
Yeah.
And
I think it's good idea to ask for companies to join also the foundation to stabilize the funding of the future there.
Exactly. So of course it's easy now to be kind of freewheeling, that because others are paying, you don't need to, but that's kind of not the nicest attitude, of course. Well, our membership fees aren't big. So I mean, if you compare to commercial licenses of any kind of software testing tools, they are, for a single user, they are higher. So, but that the smallish sums, they really help in our case. And it makes it so that the development is sustainable. And hopefully, I mean, that would also help with having more people working with the core.
Yeah.
We hope that we will get more people who are kind of sponsored, that they can do that in a work time, like Tatu has lately been able to do. But also having so that we could have self-employed people or something like that we can also pay like unpaid for the work. So that would be. That would be good and make it the whole thing more sustainable. And of course, we have a lot of projects in the ecosystem that we would love to fund. We are funding some, like the editor at the moment. But yeah, so even more would be good. Then that helps with everybody. Another way, if you want to help us, is just and that's you get concrete benefit is joining our conference. So we have the Robocon conference coming. It's in February next year, 2026, in Helsinki, and then online in March. We actually have been lately thinking that maybe we should start running Robocon conference also elsewhere than Finland. But next time, well, it's only in a few months. We are not going. It's kind of. We have everything kind of reserved or something. That's not going to move. And most like the year after is also going to be too soon. And it's also going to be 10th time, so we most likely want to still have that in Helsinki. But there's the possibility that we, after that, want to move to get to Germany or somewhere else. We have a lot of users in Germany and also like close by countries, so it would be easier for people from like Netherlands to come here.
So it's also an opportunity to come together as the community in Robocon.
It's an awesome conference. It's a very nice atmosphere there. We have had lately like 350 people on site, or 300, something like that. Before COVID, we have it even more, closer to 500, but well, things then went down. And maybe in Finland, interest has been slightly going down because we've been running it so many times that people have been there. It's been great, but still, maybe it's not anymore like new. So that's also one reason. I think maybe we should go somewhere else where there would be people who would come there the first time or second time. But yeah, it's still relatively big and a nice atmosphere. It's great thing. So if you can come, I highly recommend coming on site. But also the online experience is pretty good. Great talks there as well. You get access, if you join the online conference, you get access also to all presentation in the on-site. We are going to eventually, because we want to help out, we want to grow the community, and we'll make all the talks available eventually. But we'll release them like slowly over the year. So if there's something that you really want to see, you actually need to come at least to the online. So yeah, that's that. But it's especially the on-site gathering. It's very good. There's a lot of familiar faces and a nice atmosphere, and we are welcoming to new people as well, of course.
Yeah, and maybe in the future there will be some Robocon in Germany too. We will see.
We'll see. We've been earlier thinking that should we start running like multiple, like one in Finland, one somewhere else, but most likely that's not a good idea, because then it's kind of the community is going to split. Not everybody can go to all possible conferences. So at the moment, for me, it feels like that we should do like 2 years in one place and then 2 years some other place, and then maybe back to Finland for 1 year or something. But no promises at the moment. Next one is certainly Finland. Most likely the year after that is still in Finland, because it actually takes quite a long time to design these. I mean, to plan these. So the year next 27, especially if we want to have it in early 27, is most likely also going to be somewhat complicated to come up with new event partners and so on. But we'll see.
Yeah, sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
So we will put all the information stuff, the links and so in the show notes. So if everyone want to join the community, the conference, the ecosystem, they will find all links there.
You can chat with Rene if he can furnish you a discount code for Robocon. I cannot promise anything, but I think
I would check that you will find it in the show notes if we get some.
I think that is possible, at least for the online, because that's something where we can of course take more people with easily, and so that should be possible.
Yeah, that's a great offer for the community. So I would talk to René now.
Then you need to cut this out if it didn't work out.
Otherwise, or we said, okay, we just tried. Pekka, thank you very much that you joined the show and gave us these insights into the history and the actual development of the robot framework.
It was fun.
I hope you will enjoy the rest of the conference too. It's mainly in German, but maybe you find your slots and you're speaking your partners here.
There are a few talks in English that I'm planning to go see, and I actually got here mostly because I know this is run by Imbus, which is one of the it's René's company and one of our member companies. So I got here to join this kind of podcast and kind of. To be around. I was, as I said, we were in Amsterdam in another conference earlier, so it was easy to get here and flying back home from here, from Frankfurt. Then.
Yeah, that's great. So enjoy the rest and have a good time. Safe travel home and see you soon.
Yes, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.